Good afternoon. My name is Abra Lyons-Warren. I'm with the Council of Large Public Housing Authorities. I'm very pleased to have all of you be here with us in this session. Before we get started, I just want to do a couple quick housekeeping notes. So we are recording today's session, so if you'd like to rewatch it at any point or share with colleagues, we will have that available in the next week or so. We'll send out an email with information on how to access that. If you have any questions of the tech or content variety, we're asking that you please type them in the chat box. If you're on a computer, you can find that in the bottom middle of your screen. There's a little chat bubble. If you're on a tablet like an iPad, you can find that at the top right hand of your screen. We have everyone muted. We ask that if you're not that you just leave yourself on mute, please, just in case we have any static or your phone rings, something like that. So we appreciate your help with that. And I think we'll drop a link in the chat toward the end, but we just would encourage everyone to please fill out an evaluation for this session. If you're in the app for the conference, you can do it there. Otherwise, we'll be sending out an email at the end of the day with a link to a SurveyMonkey survey. We really appreciate having feedback to help us plan for future events, as well as to pass on to our speakers. So with that, I'm really pleased to turn things over to Phil Tegler. He will be introducing this session, and I think it will be a really, really great and exciting topic. Phil?
Thanks, Abra. I'm Phil Tegler. I'm the Executive Director of the Poverty and Race Research Action Council, and I also help to manage the Mobility Works Collaborative. I'm especially glad to be here this week. We've all been witness to the pain and anger of the past week, and many of us have felt that pain and anger very personally. But I'm just hopeful that our work on housing mobility and the work of my co-panelists can be a small part of the healing and reform process that our country and its institutions need. I'm going to briefly introduce our topic and then turn it over to our three panelists. As I said, I help to manage the Mobility Works Collaborative, which is a technical assistance group composed of my organization, PHAs, the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, and the three largest mobility programs in the US in Baltimore, Dallas, and Chicago. We work with public housing authorities and nonprofits around the country to develop new regional housing mobility programs for PHA housing choice voucher programs. We also provide training and a housing search tool to help PHA staff and families find rental housing in low poverty communities. And I know there's a lot of excitement right now about the $50 million bipartisan housing mobility demonstration. And we still expect that NOFA to be coming out this month, the last we heard. As Stephanie DeLuca found in her 2016 report, children participating in the Baltimore Housing Mobility Program experienced a dramatic change in school quality, school poverty rates, and racial segregation. And we know, especially for young children, these kind of changes can be life-altering. But I also want to acknowledge that these kind of moves aren't for everyone, as we all know, and families that choose to remain in high poverty neighborhoods and schools need the kinds of investments that we've heard about in this conference and in the last session. And we actually hope that many more PHAs will be able to pursue both types of collaborations, these educational collaborations in the future. The two newly developing mobility programs represented here in Cleveland and Long Island are focused on helping housing choice voucher children access high-performing, low-poverty schools. And we've also invited Millie Arbaje Thomas, who runs one of the oldest city to suburban school integration programs in the country, to provide an educational perspective on our housing mobility work. Now, in this brief introduction, I don't have time to go through all of the research on the benefits of housing mobility for families, but just as a reminder, the initial positive research on the health benefits of the Moving to Opportunity experiment was followed up by the research of Raz Chetty and his team in 2015, which looked at the outcomes for MTO children who moved to low poverty areas when they were young. Their powerful findings on increased incomes, increased college attendance and graduation, and decreased teen pregnancies for the treatment group is part of what led to the bipartisan consensus that gave us the housing mobility demonstration in Congress in 2018 and 2019. Finally, before I turn it over to Doravette, I want to make sure you have access to the resources of the National Coalition on School Diversity, which has terrific research summaries on the improved academic and social outcomes of school integration for children. These are the kind of research findings that are very important if you're pitching a housing mobility program to your board or to your community. It's especially those proven social outcomes of school integration that I think we need right now. Outcomes like lifelong reduction in racial prejudice, improved cross-racial understanding, empathy, and cross-racial friendships. For our future, I think this is one place we need to start. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Doravette Nolan from the Cuyahoga Metropolitan Housing Authority in Cleveland. And remember, if you have questions along the way, please add them to the chat box. You can also raise your hand later in the Q&A session. Thanks. Doravette?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. Like Bill mentioned, my name is Doravette Nolan. I'm the Director of Policy Planning and Housing Mobility for the Cuyahoga Metropolitan Housing Authority. Just to tell you a little bit about CMHA, we're located in Cleveland, Ohio. We are the first chartered housing authority in the nation, established in 1933. At CMHA, we manage and operate over 10,000 affordable housing units through the public housing and RAD programs. And we also administer just over 15,000 vouchers in the Housing Choice Voucher Program. With those programs combined, we serve over 55,000 people, making us the 7th largest housing authority in the nation. In the past few years, we have become increasingly aware of the research to showcase that through housing mobility, a voucher could positively affect a family with young children if the voucher is used in a community with low poverty and high-performing schools. Participation in a mobility program has the potential to increase a child's economic outcomes later in life with higher incomes, greater job opportunities, and a higher level of education obtained. Access to high-performing schools is one of the main drivers of a housing mobility program. And developing a housing mobility program that gives participants an opportunity to thrive is something that CMHA is committed to and investing in as part of the goals in our strategic plan. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thanks. Part of our strategic plan is to leverage new approaches and resources that will not only provide greater access to quality, affordable housing opportunities and choice throughout Cuyahoga County, but also lead to the deconcentration and revitalization of our current affordable housing throughout our community. Providing access to safe, affordable housing isn't just about the property, it's about the community the home is located within. Since 2016, through the efforts of Enterprise Ohio, CMHA has been a part of a team of fair housing advocates, affordable housing advocates, and public sector leaders that began meeting regularly to discuss challenges and find systemic opportunities to work together on reducing residential segregation. Together, we created a both-and approach that calls for continued place-based development investment in areas of revitalization, as well as new investment in well-resourced areas to enable low-income families to move to neighborhoods of high opportunity. The Fair Housing Working Group is actively working together on fair housing issues in the county. One of its main goals is to support CMHA's voucher mobility work, including exploring other models of housing choice voucher mobility around the country. In an effort to achieve this goal, CMHA has been working with the team at Mobility Works over the past year to develop a comprehensive plan for voucher mobility in Cuyahoga County, using data and best practices to intentionally develop voucher mobility supports to help the participants we serve. Next slide, please. As part of our plan for mobility, we have engaged the Fair Housing Center for Rights and Research as our mobility counseling partner. The Fair Housing Center was established in 1983. They are a local, not-for-profit fair housing agency that promotes equal housing opportunities and positive race relations in Northeast Ohio. They provide a number of fair housing-related services to individuals, real estate owners, and professionals, as well as municipalities, counties, and other government entities. And these services include research, enforcement, advocacy, education, and outreach. The Fair Housing Center has recently published 2 reports on housing choice vouchers within our county. In February of 2016, their report focused on housing mobility for vouchers in the county. The report analyzes the location of voucher holders in the county against opportunity maps of transportation, health, job proximity, and school proficiency, amongst other factors. They found that within Cuyahoga County, voucher holders are clustered in racially segregated areas with high poverty, high crime, low education opportunities, and high exposure to environmental hazards. They followed that up with a report published in December of 2017 on racial discrimination within the voucher program, where they examined how refusal to take a voucher might serve as a proxy for race-based discrimination and how limiting housing choices perpetuate racial segregation. Both of these incredible publications helped highlight the need for a program to help our voucher holders access areas with greater opportunity. And given their extensive knowledge on issues affecting voucher holders within our community, the Fair Housing Center will be a key partner working along CMHA to ensure our mobility program is strong. Next slide, please. In this chart provided by our partners at Mobility Works, shows the disparities between those on the voucher program and non-subsidized renters and homeowners. It also highlights the disparities along racial lines within the voucher program as it relates to quality schools. It's important to note that this information is for our entire metropolitan statistical area, not just Cuyahoga County. The percentages here show the median proficiency of the nearest elementary school to where our voucher holders live, based on how they rank in academic proficiency in math and English language arts. The data here clearly shows the racial disparities that exist amongst both assisted and non-assisted households when it comes to having access to high-performing schools. Next slide, please. This is the map of Cuyahoga County. Based on data from the Child Opportunity Index, the green-colored areas of the map are determined as having high opportunity for school-aged children. This is where our mobility program will focus its efforts to find available rental units with landlords who are willing to participate in the Housing Choice Voucher Program, with the ultimate goal of providing assisted families greater access to high-performing school districts. Just for a little bit of context, if you'll see that all of this green has a white blob in the middle, that is where the city of Cleveland is actually located and where most of our voucher holders currently reside. Next slide, please. Just to illustrate that last point a little bit more clearly, this is current data which shows the areas of the county where our voucher holders currently live in relation to school proficiency index, with the dark blue areas being those with the best performing schools with the highest opportunity, and light blue and white areas, the lower performing schools. All those red dots indicate housing choice voucher households within the county. And just keep in mind that this is a map of Cuyahoga County, and CMHA has jurisdiction over the entire county. So technically, our voucher holders could live anywhere in this map, not just in the white areas. Next slide, please. This leads us into how we propose to counsel participants in our program. Next slide. With help from our partners at Mobility Works, these are key factors we've identified as important to address when helping our families find the right city or school for their child. Our counselors will help families assess areas in our county by looking at the level of diversity in the city and or school, how inclusive the school may be, how different subgroups of children, such as by socioeconomic status or by race, may be progressing at a particular school. It's important to be aware of the dynamics in different cities or school districts, even individual schools within the district, in order to determine if there are any economic or racial segregating factors at play so that our families can be well informed when making decisions on where to move. Next slide, please. In Ohio, we have access to a great resource provided by our state. This is the Ohio School Report Card. It will be helpful in determining targeted areas. This tool allows anyone with internet access to assess the performance of school districts and even an individual school. Next slide. This is an example of the Ohio School Report Card for a local school district. The report card shows you the overall grades for the district, along with measurements on key factors such as achievement, gap closing, and graduation rates. Since the ratings are provided on the same components, users can make apples-to-apples comparisons on the schools around them. Families even have the flexibility to focus only on the factors that are most important or relevant to their specific needs. This is all in a comprehensive, easy-to-understand, user-friendly format. Next slide, please. You can, by clicking on the View More Data, users can get a drilled-down version of a specific rating to learn all the details on how that measurement was attained. This gives users a lot of information and detail they might need to determine if this component is particularly relevant to them, or if they don't need to focus on that component, instead focus on something else, according to what's affecting the family right now in this moment. It's really up to the user to decide. It's kind of a choose your own adventure when deciding how to use this tool. Next slide, please. So this concludes my presentation. In the future, CMHA will continue to partner with Mobility Works and the Fair Housing Center to move forward with a mobility program for Cuyahoga County based on available data and best practices, and hopefully obtaining funding, whether through the HUD Mobility Demonstration NOFA or other sources. Thank you so much for having me again, and I guess, Nadia, it's all up to you now.
Thank you, Dorvet. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining on this important topic, mobility, particularly with Section 8 vouchers. I wanted to give a shout out to our new intern that just started in our office, Nishat Shaduri, who is starting in a very bizarre and difficult time. And I think, like this very conference, we're just really trying to learn the technology to make the conversation and the learning as meaningful as possible. So welcome, everybody. I'm here to talk about our brand new program, a Long Island Housing Mobility Program. It is funded by the State Attorney General's Office out of settlement funds, working with Enterprise, with PRAC and Mobility Works, and newly welcoming CDC Long Island, who will be our mobility counselor there. And I see a couple of folks from there. So welcome, everybody, and we're really looking forward to working with you. Next slide, Bill, please. So I am from the Fair and Equitable Housing Office of New York State Home and Community Renewal, HCR, which is the state housing agency. We do Section 8. We administer 44,000 housing choice vouchers in 52 counties throughout New York State and a network of local administrators. We do affordable housing development, low-income housing tax credits, and the like. We've done 63,000 affordable units developed or preserved in the last 4 days. We have home ownership mortgage assistance, community revitalization, rent stabilization, and tenant protection units. All of this is to say we do a lot, and we're trying to tackle housing and barriers to housing through a lot of different methods. Can you go to the next slide, please, Phil? So important in all of those things I just listed is a fair housing component. It's really looking at fair housing access and opportunity for all New Yorkers, the ability to choose where your family can thrive. And, you know, we've heard throughout this conference about barriers, about historic and systemic racism and barriers to access. And that is what's important for us to consider in each of our components of addressing housing in New York. Next slide, please. So again, we've heard a lot about choice and access. Those are kind of a lot of the key words when we think about fair housing, where we think about where we want to live, how we want to live, housing without discrimination, you know, either overt or covert when we're talking about disparate impact or straight up discrimination. This is what colors our work. Next slide, please. So one of the tools, sorry, if you can go back, Phil. That one, yes, thank you. So one of the tools that we have started using are what's called opportunity tracks. And these we use not only for a Section 8 housing choice voucher mobility program, but also to incentivize development of affordable housing. They are census tracts throughout New York State. There's about 1,400 of them, where there are two factors that determine whether it's an opportunity tract: schools performing better than the statewide median and a poverty rate less than or equal to 10%. There are a lot of indices that measure opportunity, and Dorvet went through one. It was the Child Opportunity Index. There's great research going on in this. Our index is very simple. It's got two factors, but what's important here is that education is fully 50% of what matters in determining what is an opportunity tract. You can go to the next one, Phil. So this here, since we're talking about Long Island, and I saw a couple folks from Long Island in the room, so hopefully I represented accurately in the room, but you're muted, so I can do whatever I want. Just kidding. Please correct me in the comments. This is a zoomed in map of our opportunity tracts in Long Island. Again, we use them for Section 8 mobility through this new program that I'm talking about, but also to incentivize affordable housing. We have set asides, you know, of our low income housing tax credits. We give extra points for these opportunity projects. We give preferences for these opportunity projects to try to really address a NIMBY and turn it into a YIMBY, I think is what I saw in the comments. This is one of our approaches. So let's talk about some basics on Long Island. We see it is about 120 miles long and 23 miles wide. All of it is a suburb of New York City. Actually, Brooklyn and Queens are on part of Long Island, but when we talk about Long Island, we're talking about kind of this suburb, Nassau County and Suffolk County. Like many places, there are areas of extreme wealth. We've all heard of the Hamptons way out on the East End, and places like Oyster Bay, but like everywhere, we have areas of concentrated poverty, and we'll look at a map later where you will see this. HCR administers 6,340 vouchers through 2 local administrators on Long Island. So if you can go to the next slide, please, Bill. So this map is a map of kind of poverty and wealth on the island. The darker the green, the wealthier; the darker the purple, the higher the poverty rates. So what's interesting here, and like I said before, areas of extreme wealth and areas of extreme poverty, but look at it closer. There's areas of extreme wealth right next to areas of extreme poverty. So you're seeing dark green right next to dark purple. Here, if you look all the way kind of west in the Hempstead area, you're seeing dark purple and purple, and then to the north, you're seeing Garden City, dark green. To the south, you're seeing kind of Rockville Center and different areas that are also green. And then also more to the east, Phil, you're seeing Riverhead, purple, and right to the south, you're seeing kind of the Hamptons, Quogue, West Hampton, and to the north, Wading River, green. So you're seeing a lot of this. Take a mental picture of this now, and Phil, let's flip to the next slide because you'll see kind of this pattern repeated. So here is school districts. Last slide was was wealth and poverty. These are school districts, and you're seeing a lot of the very similar trends. Dark blue here represents better performing school districts. Light blue represents less well-performing school districts. And, you know, just going into a general overview in Long Island, there are over 100 school districts, I think 124. That means 124 superintendents. It means different leadership structures. So you're seeing kind of, you can see very disparate school districts that again are right next to each other within a 5-minute drive, honestly. And here again, you're seeing Hempstead, light blue, right next to Rockville Center, Garden City, dark blue. And over at Riverhead, light blue, right next to Quogue and West Hampton, darker blue. So what is interesting about this in Long Island is, like I said, it's all a suburb. So it's not like a lot of mobility programs that you hear. It's a different model of mobility programs. Normally when you hear about mobility programs, you're hearing about kind of an inner city, what Dora-Yvette talked about, where there's the concentration. And then the mobility programs are kind of working with families to remove barriers to go to the suburbs. Here, it's all a suburb. And so what the point is here with the opportunity districts being right next to where vouchers are concentrated, you can really concentrate on micro moves, right? You're not asking a family or challenging your family or reducing barriers for a family to move into a different reality. You are saying, hey, look at this down the street, look at this school down the street. And that, I think, is an exciting world when we're talking about mobility. Let me see. If we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So what are the key program points when talking about a mobility program? I think we've talked about them a lot already. One of them, as Dora-Yvette mentioned, was the ability, you know, throughout the country is this kind of policies by landlords against vouchers, you know, no vouchers, working income only, that kind of language as a proxy for race-based discrimination. So critical, and what all of us should be working on, what New York has had recent success with, is passing source of income legislation, adding that to our New York State human rights statute. Then another important component is staffing. Who you have that works with these families, you know, that shows them that we have your back, that shows them that we want to listen to you, that we're listening to you, that we want to find the right fit for your family, right? This is not pressuring or forcing people to move or making them live outside of their comfort areas or breaking up social or neighborhood connections. This is about listening to families as they come through the doors and finding what works best for each family that comes through. Then there is information. That's a critical component of a mobility program. And like I said, it's the counselors, it's the mobility coaches that know the on-the-ground stuff. It's CDCLI who is on this call and will be our mobility coaches, who can say, hey, that school, the principal there, they're on the board of the racism. This is but it's in one of the top performing school districts. These people care. Let's look at apartments around there. So this kind of on the ground, we've got your back messaging that is really important. And then payment standards, critical as well. Lots of critical stuff is, you know, increasing what the Section 8 program will pay to match the level of rent in these opportunity districts. And there are several ways to do that. We have done it in Long Island through an exception payment standard, a request from HUD, but there's the small area FMRs, and these are hard things to do, and there's data, but that's another thing, is data. And I think that's why we're on this session right now, is really trying to get these cool maps, you know, the dots of where your voucher holders live and the dots of where they can live, where the good schools are, where the transportation lines are that are next to good schools. It's tough stuff, but it's really interesting and really important. And HUD is about to release that NOFA, Notice of Funding Availability. So all of us should be looking out for it and kind of using it as an opportunity to really think about it and talk about it in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadia. And I'll turn it over now to Millie, who just got back from I understand, a big press conference with all of your superintendents in your program. So I'll pass it on to you.
Myself. Hello, everybody. Sorry that I don't have the professional background, but it didn't work on my computer. My name is Millie Arbajet Thomas. I am the president and CEO of MECO. MECO stands for the Metropolitan Council for Educational Opportunity. And I will be speaking a little bit today about integrating school systems and what kind of supports students, schools and students should have in order to make a good transition from an urban to a suburban setting. Next. So, nope, sorry, still one before. So the Metropolitan Council for Educational Opportunity was created in 1966 by parents organizing in Boston and suburban towns to provide an opportunity for children from racially segregated schools in Boston and children from racially isolated schools in the suburbs to learn together in an integrated public school setting. So that is what we do. It's a grassroots movement that brings urban and suburban students together to get a integrated public education. Go ahead, next. And one of the reasons, you know, where the MECO program started is happened in Boston as part of the white flight, when a lot of the white families started to move out to the suburbs as a result of Black families moving into the towns. And the redlining has kept many of our families from being able to move in there, and we're still living, you know, those consequences and the results of the, you know, of the redlining that happened years ago. And as a result of it, you know, one of the only opportunities for us to access the high-performing schools is through participating in an integration program such as MECO, because it's really, really expensive to live in these communities right now. Next. So the idea of MECO also came about as a grassroots movement. It was actually two individuals who started the MECO program. It was Leon Trilling from Brookline, one of our suburban towns, who realized that children being educated in isolation wasn't helping their own schools. And then a Black mother from Boston who was fighting against the discrimination of the school system here in Boston, and where the Boston school riots happened. And as a result of the two of them coming together, they opened up the first MECO program in the town of Brookline. Next. We currently exist in 33 districts. There's 3,150 students, and these are the towns where we have a MECO program. Every single morning, 3,150 kids get bused from the city of Boston, if you see that in the pink, and they go to these 33 different communities. The majority of the rides, except for Brooklyn and Newton, are at least an hour each way in order to access these educational opportunities. Next. The way that the MECO program works is that there's a structure for the MECO districts. They actually, we send a grant that we receive from the state legislature, and the grant goes to the school committees of the of the of each town, and then the superintendent oversees the MECO program, who then hires a MECO director, which has been right now all of them are people of color who oversee the program, the enrollment, and the support for the students. There's bus monitors, there's support staff such as coordinators, liaisons, social workers, advisors who actually support our students once they are placed there. Next. In terms of the support that we provide for our students in our districts, there's a number of things that happen as a result of the MECO program being there. There's a level of intentionality that takes place as part of being an integrated school experience. So we ensure that there's cultural experiences and programming that takes place. These are pictures of some mini grants on the left that we provided from the MECO headquarters office in Boston. We provided funding to have these different people come in and perform, to really expose the student population to celebrating that diversity that exists within their community. There's also social programming where we do a lot of affinity groups. There's this terminology that our students and other people use called code switching. When you go back and forth from two communities, you have to change who you are depending on who your audience is. So for us, it has been very important for the students to have affinity groups and lunch groups and a MECO office where they can go and they can feel like themselves. I mean, it's not an easy task to integrate classrooms. And a lot of times our kids have said they feel exhausted, trying to fit in. And this is where they can let their guard down and just be who they are. Next. The other ways that we support these participating districts is that we do professional development, and we provide speakers and facilitators and trainings and roundtable discussions to talk to each district about what they can do to really bring racial equity, to improve their discipline practices, to use a curriculum that is culturally appropriate, to do more diverse teacher hiring. And this is an example of one of our largest districts where we came together and helped them to start a administrators racial equity group. So these are all administrators of the Newton Public School System who came together to create this committee so that they can hold each other accountable. Next. The other things that make that in these communities, when you are doing this integration, that makes it more welcoming for at least for people of color, is when you have groups that are created within these communities to really specifically address racial justice. And these here are just an example of some of the groups that were created by the suburban communities, and that's when we see real change happening, when the community takes ownership and they create their own, their own committees. They're the taxpayers in those towns, and they actually fight for, for more equitable resources, and they fight for the program to stay alive. And whenever the school committee looks at funding and maybe thinks about eliminating the MECO program, these are the people that we count on in these communities in order for them, in order for us to get the support. So these are all local groups that create their own opportunities to talk about race within their town residents. So we support them as well, and they support us in in our advocacy efforts for our state funding. Next. So this is one of our my predecessor, Jean McGuire. She was the executive director of MECO for over 40 years. And one of the things, one of her famous quotes is, it ain't the bus, it's us. So a lot of the times people talk about the MECO program as a busing program, but on the left. But what we're trying to tell people that it's really a movement, not a movement of buses, but a movement of people, where we have the opportunity to change people's minds and people's hearts, especially during this crisis that we're going through in our country. That what better way to fight racism than through interracial friendships, and also through bringing people together to learn from one another in a classroom setting. So we feel like the MECO program is playing a big role right now in, in this fight for, for justice. Next, I don't know if this is the last one, Phil. Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks a lot, Millie. And I think we have about 15 minutes, if I'm not mistaken, for questions and discussion. There's been a few comments in the chat, which I'll get to, but I would encourage you, I mean, there's 60 folks in here. If someone wants to be brave and cut in and ask a question, that's fine with us. I mean, I'll start, I guess, with a couple questions, and people can either ask questions in the chat or speak up. I want to start with Millie, I think, and maybe get some comments from Nadia and Dorothy. I mean, you know, METCO is, you know, a famous program. It's really, I think, one of the very first interdistrict school integration programs in the country, and it's evolved to really provide a pretty amazing suite of services, as you kind of described in brief. You know, I think the mobility programs that our partners are developing, you know, it's unlikely that they're going to be able to replicate all of the kinds of supports you have in place in this program. And I'm wondering, you know, what's your advice? Like, what are the most important basic things to do to support kids and families going into, you know, coming into new schools, whether it's on a bus or, you know, in a new apartment? What would your recommendation be about the, you know, the most important things to do?
You know, I think that one of the things that would be helpful as people transition into the suburbs to live is to ensure that there is some staffing there. I know that not everybody can provide the level of support that a program like, you know, like MECO is providing, but there should be at least someone there who is a counselor, an advisor, who is, you know, helping to communicate with the family as they move into the town and give them the opportunity to ask the questions, to identify, you know, where their students can, you know, can join groups. So right now, you know, if people just go there by themselves, they're gonna feel lost. It is a new world if you move from an urban to suburban community. So I just really feel that staffing to oversee any newcomers from a different part of town would be really beneficial, even if it's just one person who is like the welcome center for new families. And I think that should be for anybody moving into a place. Is there a welcome center that is, you know, that is making people feel like they belong there, and we know you're coming, we're expecting you, and we're here for you.
That's interesting, and I know that you know, from my work in Hartford, Connecticut, you know, there's several suburban school districts that do a great job when new kids come into the district. They really are very welcoming, and I guess that raises the question for Nadia and Dorvet. You know, what you know, you're going to need to make this decision at some point. You know, what are the pros and cons of actually having that conversation with the school districts? Is it better to you know, to kind of out your kids and to say, you know, we're participating in this housing mobility program, or just rely on the school district to handle that? What do you think about engagement with the school districts in the mobility program context?
I can take that, Phil. I think the point of a mobility program is just so hyper individualized that you are really, you know, making solutions on a family by family level. They're kind of a one-stop, you know, like we're always going to reach out to the school district or create liaisons to the school district, you know, is maybe not tenable or really fruitful in every single case. I think that's where the challenge of hiring is, and who these mobility coaches are, because they wear a lot of hats. They're a real estate agent. They're researchers on what the local school district is like. They're counseling the family on, you know, this is the makeup, this is the diversity, this is who the principal is. Maybe, you know, maybe not here, maybe more over there, you know, without with providing full information, not steering, just providing kind of the full information for them to, for families to decide, you know, where they want to live and where their family can thrive. And sometimes, you know, one of the hats is school liaison. Sometimes it's landlord mediator. And it's really kind of a hiring decision and a program decision to kind of really be hyper individualized and an incredible listener for each family.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's really based on the individual level and providing the supports as necessary for the family. So if they feel they want you to step in and be that communicator between them and the district, our counselors could be there for them to do that. At least that is our plan. But if they just want us to give them the information and hang back, let them make all of the decisions, that is, you know, them to, we're just here to support them, not exactly pick and choose for them. And I don't think there is any one way to do it. It's really up to what helps that person the most. And maybe they could change their mind in between the supports. When they first move, they don't feel like they really need the counselor to be as engaged, and then something happens and we need to step in, and that's just part of the plan, to be there for the family and provide that support.
I mean, that's actually really interesting. I think both of those comments reflect the best practices of the programs we work with in Baltimore, Chicago, and Dallas. You know, even in Dallas, where there's a lot of focus on helping the family connect to the school, there's not an initial outreach to the school per se. It's a family by family decision. So in terms of the chat, we haven't gotten many things I would characterize as questions. I do want to flag a couple things people have mentioned. One is the, you know, the different ways of assessing, you know, target eligible areas, mobility areas, well-resourced areas, as they're called in the Cleveland Metro. You know, New York State uses their LIHTC kind of map across the board for vouchers and development. We've been, several of the places we've worked with use this Child Opportunity Index from the Diversity Data Kids group at Brandeis, which is a research-based index that looks at about, you know, like 16 plus factors focused on outcomes for young children. The Opportunity Atlas was mentioned in the chat, which is a great resource out of Opportunity Insights at Harvard, which looks at the track record over, you know, a 15 to 20-year period of particular neighborhoods in achieving outcomes for kids. And that, you know, what we've done in some places is we've used both indices together to compare and contrast and to, you know, when there's an effort to be as inclusive as possible with the opportunity mapping. They're very similar in terms of the outcomes, but there's a lot of very interesting differences as well. Also, someone in the chat mentioned the HUD Landlord Task Force, which is a whole effort to do outreach to landlords and learn more about what PHAs can do to recruit landlords, particularly in the lower poverty neighborhoods that have been harder for PHAs to access. And we just came out with a report this past week also called Recruiting the Opportunity Landlord. It's on the CRAC website, and I think also the Mobility Works website, by a group of researchers, including Stephanie DeLuca and Phil Garboden. And the third author is probably watching this session right now, and I forgot her name, and I duly apologize. If you are watching, I'm sorry, but there were three excellent authors, and just the kind of things that landlords are looking for in these higher opportunity, higher market areas, and how to make the program more attractive to them. Do we have any questions from the participants? Anyone want to unmute and ask a question now. From Hannah Mannion, we run a program directly connected to Houston's Housing Authority, and we have agreements with landlords who traditionally do not accept vouchers to accept families through our program. We are seeing a huge demand. We enable the recipients to have a choice in the relocation. We only work with landlords with properties that are zoned to A and B ranked schools. It's a unique program we want to share with other cities. Well, that's not a question exactly, but that is a really excellent alternative type of mobility program that, you know, acquires master leases on groups of apartments in high opportunity areas and then subleases them to voucher families. It's a great innovative program. In Houston, I think Dallas has a smaller version of that as well. You know, I think it's something for new mobility programs to explore. It's a kind of project basing, although not quite. Well, let me ask a little bit of if other people are in the chat asking questions, let's see. We're trying alternative methods in Houston, again, to help build housing and education stability. They're both reliant on one another. Angela from Cleveland asks about incentivizing landlords, challenges and successes. You know, I would say that the, you know, different programs, including, and I'll let, you know, if you want to take this question, Nadia, you can. I know that different programs are experimenting with different types of landlord incentives. And the New York program has a fund they've set up to kind of give a one-time improvement grant to landlords who participate in the program with the commitment that they'll stay in the program for, you know, a period of years. It's interesting, you know, in the high opportunity areas around Baltimore, there are no particular incentives like that. What we have are payment standards that are high enough to cover the market rent. They have payment, they've actually figured out how to give the rent payments on the first of the month to all the landlords. They have really quick turnaround on the request for tenant approval and the inspection so that the property owners don't have to leave their property, you know, vacant for too long. I believe they also cover the, you know, if somebody rents in the middle of the month, they'll cover that. And they have a dedicated landlord liaison to be there, so the landlord always has someone to call, always knows the customer service. So, you know, you don't always need incentives if you have a program that works really well for the landlord. And that's part of what's highlighted in our new report. So, good question from Zubin Adrian Vala from the city of Norfolk. How should principals and teachers be involved in this? Are the mobility moves timed around school calendars? Great question. Who would like to take that?
So yes, you know, our Long Island program, there's been a huge push by PRAC and CDCLI to get kind of prime moving season, which is the summer, even, you know, in this COVID pandemic, which, you know, big question mark on how that affects moves, but it is geared towards the school and moving season. But I think that's a good question, especially since a lot of the folks in this room are from the education side of things. And kind of, it's not always tied to mobility. I think, you know, the earlier question about reaching out to the school districts, you know, with unlimited funding and even with limited funding, kind of policies of inclusion, programs of inclusion, affinity groups, all of that stuff should be baked in the bread of our schooling system, private, public, charter, whatever it is, kind of. and the mobility program, mobility counselors, coaches should plug into what's there. With unlimited funding, yes, they also do that work and try to create it in each school that they're doing mobility for. But I think that the key is being a liaison. So I think on the education side, it's making sure those programs are there so that when folks, move to those areas, they can plug in. And that can be micro, that can be reaching out to the kid and student and family and saying, hey, welcome, I'm a resource. Or it can be more programmatic and systematic. I think it's kind of from all areas, all of us in the room and beyond have to work on this on a day-to-day basis in our daily interactions and in our programmatic efforts.
Hi, this is Matthew. I have a question.
Great.
So we're talking about schools and community. And in 2008, the biggest challenge we had was single families went through a huge crisis. And we shifted to a modality of rental quickly. But the mindset is driven, and affordable housing is driven by single family. So how do you offset equity, parity in schools if many communities are adverse to affordable and equity?
Well, you've launched into a question that is larger than the 1 minute left in this session. I do agree with your perspective. I think one of the beauties of the Housing Choice Voucher Program, especially in places with small area fair market rents or exception payment standards based on small area FMRs, which is the option of any PHA, is that you can get into whatever market you may have in a town, in a school district. The town I live in is a largely single family town, but it's got a lot of 2-family, 3-family, and even some apartment buildings. And, in the Baltimore program, where I'm on the board, there's, a large number of the families that, the thousands of families in that program are living in 1- and 2-family properties that are renting. So, in other words, if you have the exception payment standards that are set right, it's possible to get into even those kinds of communities while we work on the larger problem of suburban exclusion, and land use.
But it isn't even suburban. I would say that's not, we think it's suburban. It's urban and suburban.
Well, that's true, yeah, and right. And the Minneapolis, yeah, I very good point. I think we're at time.
Yes.
Yes, I'm trying to be mindful of that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Phil. Aubrey had to step out. She's in the main ballroom now. I don't know if you guys want one more question, or I think, it feels like we've had a pretty good conversation so far, so I think we could wrap up. But if you do have any more questions, everyone's contact information is listed here. They're available. And I just want to thank the presenters. Thank you for putting together such a great panel. And for everyone, we are having our kind of closing plenary from now until 3:30. So if you could just go directly into the main ballroom, that would be great. And I'm going to close out this room. So thank you, everyone. And it was great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.